There is a kind of pain that makes noise, and there is another kind that hides behind silence. The noisy pain cries, complains, and asks for sympathy. But hidden pain wears a confident face. It continues posting pictures. It tells everyone that nothing happened. It pretends that the person who walked away never mattered. Yet behind closed doors, a private battle may be taking place. When you finally stop answering, stop explaining, stop defending yourself, and stop returning to the same emotional battlefield, something changes. The person who once depended on your reactions can no longer reach the version of you they controlled. But understand this clearly. No contact is not a weapon. It is not a game. It is not a method of making another person suffer. No contact is sometimes the final boundary of someone who has exhausted every explanation. And the deepest lesson is not about what happens inside the person you left. The deepest lesson is about what begins to happen inside you when you stop abandoning yourself to maintain a destructive connection. The deepest pain after no contact is often not simply the loss of a relationship. It is the loss of control, access, and emotional influence. A person with strong narcissistic traits may tell everyone that they do not care. They may act confident, appear cheerful, and behave as though your departure meant nothing. But behind that public performance, your silence may represent something they never expected, the end of their ability to control your emotional world. Think about the pattern that may have existed before you walked away. They said something hurtful, and you explained why it wounded you. They became distant, and you worked harder to restore the connection. They accused you unfairly, and you defended your character. They threatened to leave, and you tried to prove your loyalty. Every reaction gave them evidence that they could still influence your mood, your decisions, and your sense of peace. Even negative attention was still attention. Even arguments were still engagement. Even your tears could reassure them that they remained important in your life. Then no contact changes the entire system. You stop replying. You stop defending yourself. You stop trying to make them understand. You stop asking for closure from the same person who repeatedly created confusion. Suddenly, the emotional door they once entered whenever they pleased is closed. That can be deeply unsettling for a controlling person, because their sense of importance may have depended upon your reactions. They may not only miss you as an individual, they may miss the emotional authority they believed they possessed over you. This is why some people react strongly when they realize that no contact is real. They may send an unexpected message, make a dramatic apology, create an emergency, use mutual friends, or pretend that nothing serious happened. They may become angry, unusually affectionate, or suddenly interested in changing. The approach may vary, but the purpose can sometimes remain the same: to discover whether they can still receive a response. You must understand that a response is not always just a response. In an unhealthy dynamic, it may become proof that the connection is still available. When you answer out of guilt, curiosity, loneliness, or anger, the cycle can reopen. The conversation may begin calmly, but soon you may find yourself explaining, questioning, doubting, and defending again. This is why boundaries must be based on wisdom rather than temporary emotion. No contact is not about punishing another person. It is not a secret strategy for making them suffer. It is a decision to stop participating in a pattern that has repeatedly damaged your emotional well-being. There is an important difference between losing a person and losing control over a person. Healthy love grieves the loss of connection. It remembers the person's humanity, respects their decision, and eventually accepts the end. Control-based attachment often grieves the loss of access. It asks, how could they leave me? How could they ignore me? How can they live without my approval? That difference matters. The controlling person may struggle because your silence challenges the story they told themselves. They may have believed you would always return. They may have assumed that your compassion had no limit. They may have mistaken your patience for weakness and your forgiveness for permission. But the moment you maintain your boundary, you teach a lesson without speaking. Kindness does not mean unlimited access. You are allowed to stop answering someone who repeatedly disturbs your peace. You are allowed to leave a relationship in which your dignity is constantly negotiated. You are allowed to choose emotional safety even when the other person dislikes your decision. Some people will call you cruel because they benefited from your lack of boundaries. They will say you have changed because the former version of you tolerated more. They may accuse you of being selfish because you are no longer sacrificing yourself to keep them comfortable. Do not allow those accusations to confuse you. A boundary is not hatred. Silence is not always manipulation. Distance is not always revenge. Sometimes distance is the final form of self-respect. However, your healing must not become dependent upon imagining what they are experiencing. You may be tempted to wonder whether they are angry, lonely, embarrassed, or regretful. You may search their social media, ask mutual friends for information, or wait for evidence that they finally recognize your value. But when your attention remains fixed on their reaction, they still hold emotional power over you. True freedom begins when their response is no longer your reward. You do not need them to miss you in order to know you mattered. You do not need them to suffer in order to prove that leaving was right. You do not need them to admit what they did before you give yourself permission to heal. Your value was never created by their attention, and it cannot be destroyed by their rejection. The most powerful part of no contact is not that another person loses access to you. It is that you regain access to yourself. You begin hearing your own thoughts again. You rediscover what peace feels like. You stop measuring every word to avoid conflict. You stop living in anticipation of the next emotional storm. Your life begins to belong to you again. So maintain your boundary for the right reason. Do not remain silent to make them chase you. Remain silent because you have finally decided that your peace is not available for negotiation. Let them manage their emotions. Let them explain your departure however they choose. Let them face whatever your absence forces them to confront. Your assignment is not to control their response. Your assignment is to protect your healing, rebuild your identity, and move forward without returning to the place where you repeatedly lost yourself. Silence can become deeply uncomfortable for a person who has spent years avoiding honest self-examination. During the relationship, conflict may have served as a distraction. Arguments, accusations, emotional pressure, and constant drama kept attention focused on what you were doing, what you were supposedly failing to provide, and how you needed to change. As long as the conversation remained centered on you, they did not have to look closely at themselves. Then no contact begins. The arguments stop. The explanations disappear. The emotional reactions are no longer available. Suddenly, there is no one present to blame, provoke, correct, or control. The noise that once covered their inner struggles becomes quiet, and silence may force unresolved emotions closer to the surface. This does not mean every person with narcissistic traits will respond in the same way. Some may immediately seek attention from someone else. Some may appear cheerful, successful, or completely unaffected. Others may become angry, restless, or obsessed with restoring communication. Human behavior varies, and only a qualified professional can diagnose a personality disorder. However, when a person depends heavily on external admiration, control, or emotional reactions to maintain their sense of importance, losing access to those things can create intense internal discomfort. Behind the confidence may exist insecurity. Behind the superiority may exist shame. Behind the constant need to win may exist a fear of being ordinary, rejected, forgotten, or exposed. During the relationship, your attention may have helped them escape these feelings. When you praised them, they felt important. When you defended yourself, they felt powerful. When you chased them after they withdrew, they felt wanted. Even when you argued with them, your emotional energy confirmed that they still had a central place in your mind. But when you stop responding, they can no longer use your reactions to regulate their emotions. The silence may confront them with questions they do not want to answer. Why did this person finally leave? Why are the old tactics no longer working? Why can they no longer provoke a response? What if the person they underestimated is genuinely moving forward? What if others eventually recognize the same patterns? These questions can threaten the identity they created for themselves. A person who consistently avoids accountability may protect that identity by rewriting the story. They may tell others that you are unstable, ungrateful, disloyal, or difficult. They may present themselves as the victim. They may pretend they ended the relationship or insist that they never cared. This behavior can be an attempt to escape the discomfort of the truth. Admitting that their actions contributed to the end of the relationship would require humility. It would require them to acknowledge the consequences of manipulation, dishonesty, disrespect, or emotional neglect. That level of self-awareness may be painful for someone who has built their life around avoiding vulnerability. Yet you must understand something important. Their inner conflict is not your responsibility to resolve. You may feel tempted to return because you imagine they are suffering. You may think that one final conversation will help them understand. You may believe that your compassion can rescue them from their emptiness. But compassion without boundaries can become self-destruction. You cannot heal another person by repeatedly allowing them to harm you. You cannot create accountability for someone who refuses to practice it. You cannot force self-awareness into a person who is committed to blaming everyone else. Your silence is not cruelty when communication has repeatedly been used against you. Your distance is not punishment when closeness has become emotionally unsafe. No contact is not about making someone sit alone with their pain. It is about refusing to carry pain that never belonged to you. The silence may eventually create an opportunity for them to reflect, but whether they use that opportunity is their decision. Some people seek help, develop insight, and take responsibility. Others search for new distractions, new admirers, or new people to control. You cannot determine which path they choose. Your task is not to watch their transformation. Your task is to protect your own. Do not spend your freedom monitoring whether they are lonely. Do not check their social media for evidence of regret. Do not ask mutual friends whether they mention you. Every time you make their emotional condition the center of your attention, you reconnect yourself to the very cycle you tried to leave. Let the silence teach you too. Let it reveal how much energy you spent defending yourself. Let it show you how often you ignored your instincts. Let it remind you that peace should not feel like something you must earn through suffering. The silence they fear may become the silence that heals you. In that quiet space, you can rediscover who you were before confusion became normal. You can rebuild your confidence, restore your standards, and learn that healthy love does not require constant emotional survival. What they do with the silence belongs to them. What you build inside the silence belongs to you. When you become emotionally independent, you do more than end communication. You challenge the entire identity a controlling person built around your reactions. For a long time, they may have measured their power by how quickly they could change your mood, how easily they could make you explain yourself, or how often they could pull you back into an argument. Your emotional responses became evidence that they still mattered, still had influence, and still occupied an important place in your mind. But when you stop reacting, defending, chasing, and seeking approval, that evidence disappears. Some people with strong narcissistic traits create a sense of superiority by placing others beneath them emotionally. They feel powerful when someone is desperate to be understood. They feel important when another person keeps returning for closure. They feel secure when they can withdraw affection and watch someone work harder to regain it. This is not healthy connection. It is a system of emotional control in which one person's confidence depends on another person's confusion. No contact interrupts that system. Your silence communicates that your identity is no longer available for them to define. You are no longer asking them whether you are worthy. You are no longer waiting for them to admit what happened. You are no longer offering endless explanations to someone who repeatedly chooses not to understand. That independence can be difficult for a controlling person because it reveals a truth they may have spent years avoiding. Their influence was never absolute. It only survived while you continued participating. Think about it carefully. A person can only keep you in an emotional argument if you keep entering the courtroom. They can only force you to defend your character if you continue accepting them as the judge. They can only make you chase their approval if you believe they possess the authority to determine your value. The moment you reject that false authority, the structure begins to collapse. This does not mean they will immediately admit defeat or recognize your growth. In fact, they may respond by pretending you never mattered. They may speak negatively about you, rewrite the history of the relationship, display exaggerated happiness, or quickly seek attention elsewhere. These behaviors may serve as protection against the uncomfortable reality that you are no longer emotionally dependent on them. Your independence challenges the version of themselves they wanted to believe. They may have believed you would always return. They may have assumed that your compassion meant you had no limit. They may have confused your patience with weakness and your forgiveness with permanent permission. Then you chose yourself. You stopped negotiating your dignity. You stopped presenting evidence of your pain to someone who had already witnessed it. You stopped waiting for an apology before giving yourself permission to heal. That transformation can be more threatening than anger. Anger still creates engagement. Anger still says, "You have affected me." But calm distance sends another message. "I have accepted what you are unwilling to admit, and I no longer need your cooperation to move forward." However, emotional independence is not about becoming cold, cruel, or incapable of love. It is about learning that love must include boundaries. It is about understanding that caring for someone does not require surrendering your judgment. You can wish someone healing without giving them access to hurt you again. You can forgive the past without returning to the environment that damaged you. Many people remain trapped because they confuse being needed with being loved. They believe that if another person depends on their attention, patience, or emotional labor, the relationship must be meaningful. But being useful to someone is not the same as being valued by them. A healthy relationship respects your independence. It does not punish you for having boundaries. It does not require you to become smaller so that another person can feel greater. It does not force you to choose between peace and connection. Your emotional independence begins when you stop asking, "What will they think if I leave?" and start asking, "What will become of me if I stay the same?" It grows when you trust your own memory again. It grows when you stop checking whether they noticed your absence. It grows when you refuse to measure your progress by their reaction. You do not need them to suffer in order to prove you mattered. You do not need them to return in order to prove you are valuable. You do not need them to apologize in order to confirm that your pain was real. Your recovery becomes powerful when it no longer depends on their participation. That is the deeper meaning of emotional independence. It is not merely living without them. It is living without their voice controlling your inner world. It is making decisions without imagining their criticism. It is enjoying peace without feeling guilty. It is rediscovering dreams that were buried beneath constant emotional survival. And when you reach that place, their opinion loses its authority. Their silence no longer frightens you. Their attention no longer intoxicates you. Their rejection no longer defines you. You become free, not because they changed, but because you did. Your greatest victory after no contact is not discovering that the other person is lonely, angry, confused, or regretful. Your greatest victory is discovering that you can live peacefully without needing to know what they feel at all. Many people leave a destructive relationship physically, but remain emotionally connected through curiosity. They block the phone number, yet continue checking social media. They stop answering messages, yet ask mutual friends for updates. They say they want freedom, but secretly wait for proof that the other person is suffering. That is not complete freedom. As long as their reaction determines your emotional state, they still have influence over your life. When they appear unhappy, you feel powerful. When they appear happy, you feel forgotten. When they contact you, you feel valuable. When they remain silent, you question whether you ever mattered. This means your peace is still being controlled by their behavior. No contact must become more than physical distance. It must become emotional independence. You did not establish a boundary to punish someone. You established it because continued access was harming your emotional stability, self-respect, confidence, or safety. The purpose of no contact is not to create pain in another person. Its purpose is to stop the pain repeatedly entering your own life. This distinction is important because revenge keeps you connected to the person you are trying to escape. When your goal is to make them regret losing you, you may start performing your healing instead of truly living it. You post pictures hoping they will see them. You appear happy hoping someone will report it back. You measure your progress by whether they react. But real healing does not need an audience. Real healing is quiet. It happens when you wake up and realize you no longer feel the urge to check their page. It happens when their name is mentioned and your body no longer fills with fear. It happens when you stop rehearsing imaginary conversations in which they finally admit they were wrong. Real healing begins when closure stops being something you demand from them and becomes something you create for yourself. You may never receive the apology you deserve. You may never hear them acknowledge the damage they caused. They may continue telling a distorted version of the story. They may present themselves as innocent and describe your boundary as cruelty. But you must understand that truth does not require universal agreement. You know what you experienced. You know the nights you spent questioning yourself. You know how often you forgave behavior that kept repeating. You know how many times promises were made without meaningful change. You do not need their approval to validate your decision to protect yourself. Healing also means releasing the responsibility for their emotions. You are not required to return because they feel lonely. You are not required to respond because they claim to be suffering. You are not required to reopen a harmful connection because they suddenly speak with urgency, sadness, or affection. Compassion does not mean surrendering your boundaries. You can hope they receive help without becoming their helper. You can wish them growth without participating in their process. You can forgive them in your heart without giving them access to your life. Forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. Forgiveness may release bitterness, but reconciliation requires accountability, safety, honesty, and consistent change. Your responsibility now is to rebuild yourself. Rebuild the routines you abandoned. Reconnect with people who respect your boundaries. Return to the goals you postponed while managing constant emotional conflict. Learn to trust your judgment again. Speak to yourself with patience when difficult memories return. Do not shame yourself for staying too long. Do not insult the version of you who kept hoping. That version of you was trying to survive with the understanding, strength, and resources available at the time. Your task is not to hate your past self. Your task is to educate, protect, and strengthen your present self. The greatest evidence of healing is not hatred. It is neutrality. It is reaching a place where their happiness does not disturb you and their suffering does not satisfy you. It is realizing that you no longer need them to fail for you to succeed. You no longer need them to miss you for you to feel worthy. You no longer need them to admit your value because you have finally stopped negotiating with anyone who refuses to respect it. That is power. Power is not controlling their emotions. Power is controlling your access, choices, attention, and future. Power is refusing to let old manipulation produce new decisions. Power is understanding that your energy is too valuable to spend watching someone who repeatedly drained it. One day you may look back and realize that no contact was never truly about making them understand what they lost. It was about helping you understand what you almost lost: your identity, your peace, your confidence, your direction, and your ability to trust yourself. Let them think whatever they choose to think. Let them tell whatever story they choose to tell. Your healing does not require their participation. Keep walking until you no longer measure the distance between you and them. Keep walking until you become more interested in your future than their reaction. Keep walking until silence no longer feels like punishment, but protection. The final victory is not that they suffer without you. The final victory is that you finally learn how to live fully, peacefully, and purposefully without them.